Hello. So this week we're going to dive into one of our textbooks and talk about evaluating research in academic journals. So this week is going to be a little bit different, right? And the reason for that is because it's less about the terminology and knowing the terms and the information, and more about how to think like a researcher. So when you read an academic journal, when you go through, when you write your own research proposals, are you asking the questions? Are you thinking critically? Are you able to evaluate or when you read an article, are you able to look and see, are they meeting the criteria to be able to read an article and think about it critically? And so when we look to our Bloom's taxonomy, we look to see, okay, remembering the information, understanding. We're going to be going up and down, much like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You go up and down depending on where you are in lesson. But ultimately, by the end of this class, you will be creating a new research proposal. So that means also that we're going to be learning, evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, of course, and remembering the information. So as we leave ethics behind and move into the research methods class, I wanted to start you with the information in this book so you can see what it looks like when a research article or journal or paper is being evaluated. So you can see as we move through the class and we get to the different terms and look at understanding the concepts and applying the information and analyzing it, you see what the end result is. So it gives you the picture of what it is that you're trying to get to. And you're beginning to shift the way that you think. So when you're thinking like a researcher, and this applies to your own research topics, so giving you feedback on your research proposals and some of the fantastic ideas that you've had, and what you want to begin to think is why. So you know why you've led to your research topic. Now, how are we going to observe it? What does it mean to actually bring this research to life, to choose a measure, to look at previous literature and previous research that's out there and think critically about taking that research to the next step? When should you be doing the research? Over a period of time? What is the criteria for looking at a particular phenomenon? Is it something that can be captured in a moment? Do you want to look at more data over a passage of time? And who will participate in your study? An entire population, a sample. So all of these, it's kind of that who, why, how, when, these questions that are the basis for thinking critically. So I wanted to give you this week to look through this book in detail and to be able to look at the questions that are being asked and to begin to ask them for yourself. So one of the important chapters of from the reading, we'll go to, so chapter 8, say, so evaluating measures, right? And you'll see in each of these that there's a list of questions. So have the actual items or questionnaires been provided? Do they provide samples? What is the setting? Are there specialized response formats? Were there multiple methods used? What were the key variables? Now, at this point of where we are, these will sound like questions that you may not even understand the terminology, you have heard before, sounds possibly like a foreign language at this point. And that's okay. We're going to get to the point where by the end of the semester, you know how to answer these questions. But first, I wanted you to see them. So for example, for published measures, have the sources been cited where the additional information can be obtained? So as you go forward into your literature review and you begin to look at what measures you'll use for your research proposal, when you look to see a measure that was used, are you able to go and look to find out where the original citation was for the measurement? Are they citing it? Because we always want to use measures that are statistically validated. So you'll go through, some of these will make sense, some of these won't. And that's why I wanted to give you this entire week, not to worry about learning definitions and taking a lot of copious notes, but to read through this and to become comfortable with the discomfort that you may feel as you become to be able to think differently and to be able to structure your brain differently when you look at research, right? As we take the steps, as we move up and down Bloom's taxonomy, you are literally beginning to look at things differently, and that change can feel uncomfortable. So as you go through the readings, and why I don't have a whole series of lecture notes, because really, as we move forward into the research methods, we'll go through a lot of what these definitions mean. We'll talk about the importance of validity and imperial research and experimental research, and we'll get all of the terms. But for this week, look at this textbook, go through it, because these questions that you ask will become the criteria for not only your article critique paper, but for your final research project. That by the time we get to the end of the semester and we've gone through everything, starting with the article critique, where you're able to read through an article and ask some of these questions. All right, so what was the method used? Where did they get their population? And you'll be able to answer these questions. So what measures did they use? What were the variables? How long did it take them to collect the research? Was the research collected in one sitting, or was it done in multiple attempts at research? Who did they observe? How did they get people to participate in their study? These are all questions that we'll go over the course of the semester, that as you begin your literature review, you want to be able to ask these questions, because that's what's going to give you the answers to be able to advance the field of research with your own research. So most of the time this week will be focused on the reading, going through. It's okay that it may be frustrating. It's not supposed to quite make sense just yet. I'm showing you what the end result looks like, so you know where we'll get there. And think of this as the map, right? The map may not make sense right now, but as we get to each step of the way, it will begin to make sense. And then as we get to each point, you'll be able to understand what's being asked. And so by the end of the semester, the questions in this textbook do make sense to you, and that you are able to look at a research article and be able to ask the important questions, but more importantly, to be able to ask the important questions of your own research, so that you know, have you addressed informed consent? Have you addressed ethical issues? Where have you found the measures? How are you going to observe things that you'd like to research? So for most of you, what I gave feedback in your proposals was that you had very strong topics that were of interest, that are very relevant to the field of cyberpsychology. But how are you going to bring that to life now? How are you going to observe the different variables that you've discussed? What measures will you use? So for many of you, the next step is going back and looking at the existing research, looking at the literature that's out there, and just to look for measures that may capture what it is that you're trying to study. And so this textbook, when you go through the readings, take note, and in this week's discussion group, what you're looking for is addressing the issues that maybe you didn't necessarily understand or want to know more about, or I have no idea what multi-methods means, or I didn't understand, how will I ever know how to be able to understand a treatment group or understand experimental procedures, okay? So as you have this, ask these questions to me, and that way I can also flag things that I want to make sure to highlight for future lectures in the discussion group, and highlight them to each other, because I would like to get a discussion going about what were the areas that were confusing. Did anything make sense? Did none of it make sense? Part of this shared learning experience and being able to engage in the discussion group is to be able to talk about how we go through in making sense and what the learning process is. So again, I promise you this week is different from other weeks where there will be more traditional lecture and information procedures in the process that we're more used to. But for this week, I encourage you to spend the time with this book, right? Spend the time asking those questions, trying to make sense of them. And you can start thinking about the articles that you want to use for your article critique. So find an article that you're interested in, you get to make the choice, and you can begin to ask these questions. What methods did they use? Who was the population that they sampled? Where did they get the population? Did they recruit online? Did they use college students? We want to begin to ask these questions, because this is what takes us to these next levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and to move into what it means to think like a researcher, to think like a graduate student. So this week is a transition week. It's a bridge week as we take the next step into becoming researchers and learning research methods. So again, you have any questions, let's engage in discussion on the discussion board about the process that you've gone through this week with the readings. Don't worry about knowing the definitions right now. The material that is covering the book, the terminology, the sampling. Right now, because we haven't studied sampling yet, you're not at the point to be able to evaluate, was this a good sampling procedure or wasn't it? You don't have to get there yet. We'll get there. But I want you to see what the end result will look like, where we're trying to get. So you see the destination. You see that as we move on this journey throughout the next couple of weeks, what it is that we're building towards. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, schedule some time with me, but please give special care to the reading this week into the discussion group so that I can help offer support in areas that you want to learn more about and that you can help each other in terms of shared struggles or shared information, what made sense to each of you. So, talk to you soon.